Hello everyone and welcome to the Gunpla Network. I'm the Spicer and today's episode of Ships and Stuff is brought to you by Side 7 Exports. Side 7 Exports is your one-stop shop for all your P-Bandai and Gundam base exclusive needs. Be sure to use the promo code GunplaNetwork10 for 10% off your next order. Today we continue our journey through the evolution of Gundam's alternative universes. And just like we had in part 1, we're only going to be focusing on non-Universal Century content and only animation. If you missed part 1, we covered from 1988's SD Gundam all the way up to the year 2000, and we'll kind of get more into the details of that later, but you can find that video in the description below. Now just generally as a quick recap, because it has been a bit, SD Gundam ran from 1988 to 1993 in various movies, shorts, and a television compilation. G Gundam ran from 1993 to 1994, Wing in 1994 to 1995, X in 1996, and then Endless Waltz in 1997. While Turn A would come out in 1999 and run into the year 2000, it's somewhat kind of considered UC. I didn't go nearly as in-depth in it on part 1, mainly just because it is this weird tie-in to the UC. It features old UC mobile suits, so we did cover it, but I'm still kind of counting it as UC. So regardless of whether you count Endless Waltz or Turn A, it would be about 2 to 5 years between any quote-unquote alternative universe content and what we would see next. And Bandai and Sunrise thought maybe it's time for Gundam to get a fresh coat of paint. This new coat of paint would come in the form of Gundam Seed. Gundam Seed would be set in a new era, the Cosmic Era, and would follow main character and Lord and Savior himself, Kira Yamato, a teenage student genius coordinator who gets caught in the middle of a war between the plants and the Earth Alliance. Kira is forced to take up arms in the new experimental GAT X-105 Strike Gundam to help protect his friends who are refugees after the series' initial battle destroys their home colony. Sound familiar? Seed would share a lot of Mobile Suit Gundam's concepts, such as a formal war setting, space colonies versus the Earth, neutral colonies or sides helping one side, and then, of course, you have the whole naturals versus coordinators, much like old types versus new types. The difference with this is coordinators would actually be genetically enhanced instead of just evolving on their own, so there was a little bit more meaning behind this than just a couple of people being really good pilots. Now, this applies to pretty much everything. Now, some coordinators are only selected to have certain things, and of course their parents kind of make these decisions, so Kira is kind of an all-around just perfect coordinator, quote-unquote, where some people like Lacus Klein are more mentally advanced or would have the ability to sing really well. So there is a large variety of what coordinators can do. They're not just inherently great pilots, though most of them are the only ones at the initial start of the series that can pilot mobile suits. So, it's neither here nor there. But generally, they are near superhuman level of abilities in whatever they're gifted in. And Seed does have some unintentional silly moments. It does kind of mark Gundam's first venture back into formal war drama, but this is a little bit different. This is the alternative universe's first attempt at a real war drama, not, oh, war is happening, or Hero Yui existing and just hating himself for some reason, or Gundam X kind of falling flat. This was the first real run at trying to do Mobile Suit Gundam in a new generation. And this is largely due to director Mitsubo Fukuda being a lifelong Gundam fan and pitching an updated version of the Gundam stories he fell in love with as a kid. Now, Sunrise and Bandai or at least mostly Sunrise with Gundam, are very touchy about giving newcomers projects like this. Usually they'll have some people kind of promoted from within to run a project and not just give someone new a series, but this was different. Fukuda had come in and spoke with the bigwigs at Sunrise, and they were like, yeah, no, that sounds great. He hadn't done anything with Gundam before. He was largely outside for Sunrise, although he did have a couple of directing credits to his name at this point. Now, not only was the war drama important in Fukuda's vision, but one of the more important aspects that some people forget is that Chiaki Murasawa, Fukuda's wife, was actually the writer of the series and is largely credited as to why there's no more Gundam Seed at this point, because she's passed with the making of this video. Now, this was something that really helped push Gundam back into the limelight. After Turn A's lackluster ratings numbers, it kind of bounced back from Turn X, but not quite to the Double Zeta mid-80s era great ratings. Bandai and Sunrise were really hoping this was going to be a knockout of the park, and luckily for them, it was. Gundam Seed would be pretty different in terms of what had been coming out in the last few years, and would make a big impact with the audiences. Although Fukuda wasn't the only new blood on this project, Mobile Suit Gundam planning manager Koichi Inua stated in an interview a new and younger team of animators will mainly be doing this new series and series going on, such as Gundam Seed. While the team was largely newcomers, some Gundam veterans such as Kunio Okawara and Katsumishi Yoneme would return to work on mechanical design, which is why you still get the very Gundam vibe from these mobile suits. This mix of experience and fresh point of view would bring Gundam back to its mid-1980s levels of success, with an average rating of 6.1%, the first time that Gundam had cracked the 5 or 6% mark in nearly 15 years. Gundam Seed would run from 2002 to 2003, and Seed would also help sell record numbers of merchandise for Bandai. So not only was it critically successful for Sunrise, but Bandai was making that money on that plastic, which is also important for Gundam. Overall, Gundam Seed would sell 1 million DVDs and more than 10 million model kits by the year of 2004, so 2 years after its initial release. Seed had paid off in a big way for Sunrise and Bandai. While this was somewhat of a gamble, it was pretty understandable that this was probably going to be at least at the same level of Turn A ratings-wise, but it did much better, which is good to hear. A large part of the success was attributed to the wide appeal of the show, with designs appealing to younger and female fans that we had seen included with things like Gundam Wing, and of course existing Gundam fans being drawn back in with the war drama. Seed would be the first in several regards for Gundam, being the first alternative universe to be a war drama, first to be done with digital animation, and first to be streamed via the internet. It also cranked up the spicy meter, including a scene directly implying that Kira and a love interest were intimate. As you'd imagine, Japanese parents were not all that excited for their kids/teens to see this. What did excite the kid and teens was the expansion of the high-grade line of model kits and the MSIA line of toys not being dead. Seed would make a big change for Bandai's approach to the HD line, providing nearly every single mobile suit we saw on screen and a few we didn't to the line of model kits. Seed was also fairly dense with designs similar to Mobile Suit Gundam. The Mobile Suit and Action toy line would also cover a fair amount of ground as well, but wouldn't find as much success, unfortunately. Love it or hate it, Gundam Seed was the modern rebirth of Gundam, bringing a whole new generation of fans into the fold. Hot off the heels of Gundam Seed's success, we see the return of SD Gundam with Superior Defender Gundam Force, or more commonly known as SD Gundam Force. After a decade without SD, this series would bring us a standalone story, not relying on any existing content's parody, being somewhat of a more actual real story. This story would follow a boy named Shoot, who's thrust into a war between the Dark Axis forces and the Super Dimension Guard. A clear-cut, kid-oriented good versus evil story featuring original mobile suit designs for the series that were based on existing mobile suit designs. While not being super deep or complex, SD Gundam Force is the longest-running Gundam TV series at 52 episodes during its initial run from 2003 to 2004. SD Gundam Force is a rather strange beast in Gundam, as it's not only the longest running show but also the lowest rated, with an average TV rating of about 2.1%. While Bandai had hoped for the same success that the original SD Gundam had garnered back in the 80s, SD Gundam Force missed the point. SD had been popular with kids back in the 80s, largely because it was a parody of the more serious tone of Gundam, so not only could kids enjoy it, but existing fans could also enjoy it. SD Gundam Force tried too hard to water down the same tone, but keep the storytelling more on pace without offering anything to laugh at. It should also be noted that SD Gundam Force also aired first in the US, the only television series to do so, airing in the US 4 months before airing in Japan. However, in the US it only ran for 26 episodes. It sported a largely different animation style using a cel-shaded 3D computer-generated animation style, and the series would not garner the same success in plastic as well. This divergence from the more traditional SD designs and lackluster ratings, unfortunately the plastic models and the toys stayed on the shelves to be largely forgotten. Now the UC for
Spicer! Spiceman! Spicy boy! Please, let a proper Zeke handle this. It's your boy Zappa, professional stage ninja, and this era of the UC was an interesting one to say, at the very least. Starting in 2004, MS Igloo's series of OVAs would switch perspectives, giving us a more realistic look at the Zeon side of the One-Year War. Mostly. Total of 9 episodes were split into 3 specific chunks. First, with the Hidden One-Year War in 2004 and Apocalypse 0079 in 2006, both of which would follow the 603rd Technical Evaluation Unit in testing experimental weaponry that weren't mobile suits. Lastly, MS Igloo 2, The Gravity Front, in 2009 would return to the Federation's perspective following the stories of 3 quite troubled individuals. While the 2000s didn't have a lot of activity from the Universal Century, it was definitely a time to experiment. MS Igloo's use of fully CG animations was a huge jump for Sunrise, and would be the first lengthy Universal Century content to exclusively use this method. While not having the most name recognition, this experiment was important in the grand scheme of all of Gundam. You can still see the lasting effects of Sunrise's future ventures into CGI, with Code Geass Akito, the Exiled, and Gundam, The Oneji. While not the biggest name in Universal Century, MS Igloo certainly holds a special place in Gundam's long history. And this fan.
Now it's time to return to the Cosmic Era with Gundam Seed Destiny, a direct sequel to 2002's Gundam Seed. Destiny would follow a new protagonist, Shin Asuka, who is a refugee of the conflicts of the first series as he journeys his way through the military for revenge. After seeing his family decimated in the Battle of Orb, Shin harbors a deep-seated hatred of Orb, the Earth Alliance, and the Athas, the ruling family of Orb. The next thing we see Shin do after this initial scene is he's a pilot for Zaft, and he's assigned to their new warship, the LHM-BB-01 Minerva. We've done a separate Ships and Stuff episode on that if you would like to watch it. Shin is also assigned to pilot the state-of-the-art ZGMF X56S Impulse Gundam, an updated Zaft version of the Strike and its gimmicks from Gundam Seed. And using this mobile suit, Shin helps track down 3 stolen Gundams that become the main problem to be solved throughout at least the first quarter, if not first half, of the series. Along the way, Shin crosses paths with some familiar faces such as Athrun Zala and Kira Yamato. Kira and Athrun weren't the only ones to return though, as most of the crew from Gundam Seed would return to work on Destiny, including series director Mitsuo Fukuda and writer Chiaki Morisawa. Fukuda wanted to change things with Shin and summed it up best as, "The only thing that can be said for him, Shin, is that he is a character that has completely opposite mindset from Kira. For example, Kira is a Japanese-minded person in a sense, and from the beginning of the story I thought that I wouldn't want to fight if possible. On the other hand, Shin chooses to become a military member himself. This fundamental change in approach changed a lot of the way the show would portray its tones, themes, and Shin's development throughout the war. In a way, it somewhat resembles Atherin's, but without the remorse or the same conclusion that Atherin comes to. You see, Shin has a lot of pent-up aggression, rage, and trauma that he's never resolved, and just vents these emotions through piloting a mobile suit. Seeing a more traditional soldier mentality being somewhat indoctrinated, or at least fascinated with the ideas that Chairman Randall has, is as close as we get to real grounded feel, ground-pounding soldier boots on the ground type vibes that come out of the Cosmic Era, at least up to this point. And kind of going back to the original boots on the ground mobile suit Gundam, there were some big influences in terms of mechanical design from Mobile Suit Gundam to Gundam Seed Destiny. Gundam Seed Destiny would bring back the likes of the Zaku, the Goof, the Dom, and the Core Block system, hoping to excite fans, while quite a few of them found it somewhat cheap. Updating these designs and fitting them in universe was a little bit more than a homage, to say the least. While Shin's character development takes a drastically different path from Kira's in Gundam Seed, the show was a successful follow-up with an average television rating of 5.4%. So, not the highest, and didn't quite get as good as Seed, but was still much higher than pretty much everything we'd seen in the 90s. While this was a decrease and Destiny did have its own problems, this at least was progress, and Sunrise, Bandai, everyone involved felt pretty good about it. Destiny was just as well received among Seed fans, and many felt that Shin just wasn't a great character, but they were happy to see some familiar faces. And while Destiny would win the Anime Grand Prix in 2004 and 2005, Shin would never make it to the best boy status, instead being overshadowed by Kira and Atherin, and of course the best girls Lacus, Kigali, and Stella, somehow. Destiny would carry on the extensive expansion of the high-grade line of model kits, as well as the mobile suit in action figure selection, however it would be one of the last to do so. Next, we're staying in the Cosmic Era with Gundam Seed CE0073 Stargazer, a series of OVAs that take place during Gundam Seed Destiny. The series starts roughly around the drop of Junius 7, or also known as the Break the World incident. We follow Sven Kal Pyang, a member of the Earth Alliance's 81st Independent Autonomous Group Phantom Pain. Sven pilots the GAT-X105E plus AWM/E-X09S Strike Noir Gundam. That is a lot of numbers and letters to throw together. Sven is somewhat unique as he's not only the oldest protagonist of the Seed storyline at 20, but he's just a normal dude. Well, technically he's an elite soldier trained from a young age, he's still just a dude, no seed powers, so something akin to Shiro Amada or Ko Araki. Even though he is trained from a young age to hate coordinators, he's largely indifferent, and good on Sven for not being totally crazy. We see his team on several missions, resulting in some of the darkest storylines to come out of the Gundam Seed Cosmic Era. The hatred of Blue Cosmos is the main focus of the Phantom Pain group and is pretty much the only thing that directs the protagonist trio. Think of it kind of like Ash, Brock, and Misty on adventures, but the only thing we ever see is the episode where the shopkeeper points a gun at them. We do get to see a little overlap between Stargazer and Destiny, but no direct contact with the trio escorting the Destroy Gundam to Dublin and the Junius 7 drop. While only being a 3-episode OVA series, Stargazer does help to fill out the world of the Cosmic Era, providing a nice contrast to the tone of Gundam Seed and Gundam Seed Destiny. The series of OVAs was directed by Sumo Nishizawa, who had previously done storyboarding for Gundam Seed and Gundam Seed Destiny. While this is his only directorial credit in Gundam, he's no stranger to the franchise, working on projects from F91 back in the 90s to Iron-Blooded Orphans, going through 2017. This would be the first animation of the Cosmic Era not written by Morisawa, instead being pinned by Shigeru Morita. This would be the first of any of the Gundam Seed series, as Fukuda and Murasawa had helped helm the series for both previous entries, possibly explaining the significantly darker tone that Stargazer takes. The DVD would also contain 2 6-minute shorts of the Astray storyline. The red frame and blue frame Astrays would get a little bit of animation, but unfortunately nothing past that. Fans are still clamoring to see the mangas adapted into animation. While the OVA series was critically popular among fans, it would be the last meaningful animation for the Cosmic Era until today. Now we venture into our own timeline, the Anno Domini era with Gundam 00. We follow celestial beings as they work to stop all war with armed interventions in their Gundams. Celestial Being is a small organization with the ideal to eradicate all warfare and is comprised of, what we see at least, 4 Gundam Meisters and their support staff aboard their main ship, the Ptolemaios, which we also have done a Ships and Stuff episode about. In terms of the Gundam Meisters, or the Gundam pilots, we have Setsuna F-Sei, a child soldier from the Middle East who is obsessed with becoming a Gundam, whatever that means. We also have Lock-On Stratus, Irish sniper extraordinaire, Hallelujah Haptism and his alter ego, Hallelujah, and lastly, Tierra Arde, computer humor being of the future. Together, these 4 must fight the 3 blocks to stop war and conflict, with even more war and conflict. Facing off against the equivalent of Super America, Future Europe, and Big Boy China, they have quite a bit on their hands. When the world bands together to destroy our unlikely heroes, we get a second season with much of the same, but this time it's evil UN Big World government, run by computer beings of the future, named Ribbons and other ridiculous names. Yes, this is considered a serious show and is largely the much more serious version of Gundam Wing. 00 got its start all the way back in the year 2005 under the super elaborate codename Next, bringing on board director Seiji Mushishima of Fullmetal Alchemist fame in to direct the series. This is a continuation of Sunrise bringing in new talent to help on Gundam as it seemed to have worked with Gundam Seed. While being new to the Gundam team, Mishishiwa wasn't new to the world of directing, as he had helmed Fullmetal Alchemist and Shaman King, and even a few episodes of Evangelion. Mizashima wasn't the only newbie to the Gundam 00 team, as we also saw Kentake Ibawake and Takeyuki Yasune as additions to the mechanical design team. Technically, Yasane had worked on 2006 Mobile Suit Igloo iteration, but this was his first big break into a full-fledged series. And while Ibakawa was new to Gundam, he wasn't new to mechs, working on shows like Fullmetal Panic and Eureka 7. This team was talented, but had 2 big challenges to tackle, as Gundam 00 would be the first show ever to be shown in widescreen and to air in HD. More space to animate and higher quality frames was going to take more time. This was for sure a big hurdle for any team, but 00 would go on to tackle a few other firsts. It would also be the first series to air in English before the end of the original Japanese run, and would be broken into 25 episode seasons instead of the traditional 40-50 that Gundam had been doing in the past. Well, Gundam 00 did claim some critical success, and the first season's ratings unfortunately did dip below the 5% mark at 4.85% on average. The show was starting to show the decline of Gundam into the 2010s. Now, this is a great place for people to start, and this was a lot of people's first Gundam, so there is a lot of love out there for Gundam 00. But this was just kind of what was happening at the time. People were once again starting to get a little burnt out on Gundam, although Gundam 00 and Gundam Seed were pretty significantly different. While I wasn't able to find ratings for the second season of 00, it is true that the DVD sales for both seasons did well, and they met more than their projected expectations. The high-grade line would continue to cover nearly all of the mobile suits from the universe, save a few grunt suits that I would still love to see. However, the Mobile Suit in Action line was coming to an end with the first 4 main Gundams of the series of Season 1 being the last the series would ever put out. Now, of course, there was the extended Mobile Suit in Action line, which was slightly different, but this, for the most part, was the end of Gundam toys that you would probably find in a Walmart or a Target here in North America, at least for a good long while. Back into the Universal Century for UC or Gundam Unicorn. Bandai and Sunrise's high-budget OVA series starting in the year 2010 and running until 2014. At least until narrative, Unicorn Gundam was the end of the early Universal Century in animation. The stories would follow Banagher Lynx on his journey after Laplace's box, an item that could change the last 30 years of Space Noid history and potentially destroy the Federation. Along the way, we get to see familiar faces such as Maneva Zabi, a Char clone in full frontal, and the elusive Marcinus family that had been major players in the background of the Universal Century that we had never really seen on camera. But most importantly, we get to see the return of Bright Noah's familiar face. Unfortunately, he doesn't slap anyone. Unicorn would bring the UC back to prominence in a new decade after it was largely absent in the 2000s. Well, Mobile Suit Igloo's OVAs were huge technical jumps for Bandai and computer-generated animation. Unicorn would focus on an experience. Adapting a popular story by Hirotoshi Fuyuki, Unicorn would go on to be visually stunning and have one of the most remarkable original soundtracks produced, or at least composed, by Yoshiyuki Sawano. And this would appease fans for not quite yearly releases, but very close to it, depending on some of the earlier episodes came out closer together, while some of the later episodes came out like close to a year apart. Setting a new bar for Universal Century content, Unicorn would be one of the highest quality OVAs and would almost be feature-length film level budget, at least in terms of looks, sound, and visuals. And the Blu-ray and DVD sales have been good. This spurred Bandai into repackaging this into RE0096, a TV cut of the series. Possibly the most important thing to come from Gundam Unicorn was the Unicorn Gundam itself. Not only did the Unicorn replace Gramps at the Gundam base in Tokyo, but also provided one of the most reprinted kits in Gundam history. The Unicorn design has seen many different iterations through every single grade from SD to perfect grade.
2010 would be a busy year for our giant robot overlords, as they would have 4 different projects within a single year, one of which being a return to the SD line. SD Gundam Sangokuden Battle Brave Warriors would start as a 15-minute short in theaters and end up becoming a 51-episode series helmed by Kenichi Suzuki and Kunihiro Mori. Adopting a story with the characters of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms while loosely following the story in the style of the Dynasty Warriors games, this gave way to updated SD designs with elaborate armor inspired by the characters and traditional Chinese armor design. This would prove to be more successful than its predecessor in SD Gundam Force, even spinning into its own version running in 2019, SD Gundam Sangoku Soketsune. This update and change would help bring the SD line back into current popularity, especially for non-Gundam fans. The model kit line would cover as many suits from all across the timelines, including Crossbone, Wing, and especially Gundam X.
2010 would also bring us back to the Anno Domini era with Gundam 00 Awakening of a Trailblazer the movie. Taking place 2 years after Gundam 00's second season ended, we join Celestial Being and Setsuna F-Sei on their journey to uncover the mysteries of the ELS, a metallic alien life form that starts assimilating humans and technology. They even interfere with quantum brainwaves, causing problems for Setsuna, putting him in a coma before the final battle. Being the first and only Gundam series to have actual aliens that I can remember, 00 would open the door for Gundam and kind of barely leave it cracked for the future, as Gundam really doesn't jump back into the alien thing. 00 graces the big screens with the help of director Seiji Mushishima, who would return from the previous 00 storylines. Awakening of a Trailblazer would peak at number 3 in box office earnings, and while no official budget has ever been released, we can assume the $10 million box office surpassed it, and of course that doesn't count any additional model kit sales or any other merchandising. 2010 would get rounded out with Model Suit Gunpla Builder's Beginner G, taking us into literal model kit commercial territory in terms of genre to celebrate Gunpla's 30th anniversary. The new series would be helmed by director Ko Matsuo, would be written by Yoshiyuki Kuroda, and would feature character designs by Koichiro Terada. Gunpla Builder's Beginner G would take us back to a funner, lighter-hearted tone, providing something that both children and returning fans could enjoy. Showing off the fun of building Gunpla not only worked great as a Gunpla commercial, but would also allow Bandai to reprint kits with minor changes sporting the new series title. While this wasn't making up a ton of Bandai's model kit lines at the time, this would help spawn several popular subsequent series in Gundam Build Fighters, Gundam Build Fighters Tri, and Gundam Build Divers, then Build Divers Re-Rise. It's safe to say this new Gunpla model kit commercial type show is probably going to stick around and give us some really interesting designs while reviving older ones that may not have gotten model kits. And that has been it for part 2 of the history of Gundam's alternative timelines. Keep your eyes out for part 3, where we will cover from 2010 all the way to 2021. While nothing technically has come out this year, we'll cover up to now anyway. If you have any questions, put them down in those comments below and let us know what you think about these kind of series. We quite enjoy doing them. I've been the Spicer for Ships and Stuff here on the Gunpla Network. As always, friends, stay safe and keep on building.